The following program was paid for by the friends and partners of WLMB-TV 40 Toledo.
You know, the church isn't a building, it's a body of believers.
That's right.
And so many Christians are in the marketplace working, and we have a number of folks who are able to offer Christian counseling for folks if they ask for it, if they request it. And that means that, you know, we're able to pray with people and able to approach solutions from a biblically based context.
I'm Jamey Schmitz, and welcome to another episode of Main Street, the fastest half hour on television. Of course, I'm joined by my co-host, Virginia Bossa.
Well, Jamey, we have a very interesting show today. It's going to be kind of serious subject matter as we have Matthew Rizzo from A Renewed Mind. He's the president and CEO over there. And so we're going to be talking about, you know, drug addiction and, you know, the opioid epidemic and suicide. So some serious things.
Some serious things. So, Matt, thank you for joining us on Main Street. It is wonderful to have with you. But before we get into the hard stuff, just tell us a little bit about your family. Tell us about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it. At the center of my life is Christ. In 1989, I made a decision to ask Christ into my heart. And since then, doing the best I can to follow after Christ and his teaching. I've been blessed to be ordained as a pastor through the Vineyard Ministries. I was deputized probably about a couple years ago, Lucas County Sheriff's Department, so I'm in the reserve unit with them.
Wonderful.
A husband of 18 years, a dad of, I have kids that are 13 and 10, so really appreciate doing that. But my vocation is operating as the CEO at A Renewed Mind.
Yeah. And in summary, what would you say Renewed Mind is?
So very quickly, A Renewed Mind is not-for-profit, a 501c3, faith-based, that provides counseling, assessments for anyone who struggles with mental health or addiction. We focus on healing the mind, the body, and the spirit by providing counseling and case management and assessment and support.
All right. Yeah. So what sets A Renewed Mind apart from other counseling and treatment centers?
Probably the biggest thing is that we're a faith-based organization. So that plays out in two ways. Number one, just running the organization, being faith-based really creates a different culture, a different set of guidelines when we run operations. But number two, and you probably know, the church isn't a building, it's a body of believers.
That's right.
And so many Christians are in the marketplace working, and we have a number of folks who are able to offer Christian counseling for folks if they ask for it, if they request it. And that means that, we're able to pray with people and able to approach solutions from a biblically based context.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so why are you passionate about helping people, with addiction, suicide, mental health issues?
So in my own personal life, pretty much a typical childhood growing up. Unfortunately, in 8th grade, my parents went through some tough times and decided to divorce, and that kind of dragged on for about 4 years. And during that time, it was pretty difficult for most kids, I would imagine. But it was during that time I gave my life to Christ, and the Lord teaches us to not let that experience essentially go to waste, but to give back and to share what you experienced, the hope and the healing. And so that's what motivates me personally to be able to help folks who are struggling with mental health or addiction, depression, anxiety, whatever that may be. Yeah. And I'm fortunate to work with The Renewed Mind because a number of staff share that same vision.
That's wonderful.
Passion.
That's wonderful. Just so our viewers know, you're in Northwest Ohio. Give us an idea what cities where you have faith-based clinics.
Okay, so we have outpatient clinics in Toledo, so Lucas County, of course, Wood County, we're in Perrysburg and Bowling Green. We're in Hancock County, which Findlay, we have an office. And then in the 4-county area, this has taken me a while, Fulton, Henry, Williams, and Defiance County, we have offices in that vicinity as well.
Very good. Now, of this area, what issues do you think are growing of a growing concern in our geographic area, Northwest Ohio?
Right. So two things. Number one, suicide has increased since 2013 in Lucas County. And then obviously, I mean, all you have to do is turn the news on or read the paper. Ohio has been ranked as high as number 2 in the country when it comes to deaths related to opiate overdoses.
Yeah. Let me just break that down a little bit more. The suicide rate has been going up. Is it astronomical? Is it a small increase? I mean, give us kind of a perception of, you know, how much suicide is,
right.
you know, really, you know, being on, you know, something we're having to deal with here, particularly in Northwest Ohio.
So I read an assessment that was done in Lucas County, and I believe there's been close to 230 deaths, if you will, since 2013. And every year it's gone up over the last 2016 through 17, probably gone up about 6 or 7 deaths. It's increased by annually. So when you look at statistics of who's committing suicide, generally the ages are between 35 to 44. It's the Caucasian male, and often the tool or the, I guess, hanging and firearms are really the mechanisms that people are using. I mean, that's just a fatal, there's no going back.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah. And anything north of 0 is not good.
Not good.
Yeah.
But it has increased.
And kind of the same question on opioid addiction. How much has that increase really been taken off in Northwest Ohio?
Well, state-wise, in 2016, over 4,000 people in Ohio overdosed and died related to opiate use. In Northwest Ohio, that has gone up every year. And it's unfortunate, with the cluster being in Toledo. And so that's increased just, if you read the coroner's report, every year it's gone up between 50 to 70 deaths every year.
So if someone, you know, is concerned about a loved one, you know, what are some signs, you know, that maybe somebody is suicidal?
So there's a number of things that you should look for. Often people who struggle with suicide are hopeless. They feel helpless. They're experiencing some type of emotional pain, and often they feel like they're no good anymore, that they struggle with self-doubt and self-hatred at times. And so you want to look for that. You want to look really for changes in behavior, sleeping patterns, eating patterns. Are they isolating? Are they really down in the dumps? Their mood's just really depressed. You want to watch for those things.
And what are some, you know, common causes?
For people to commit suicide? Often, again, when you boil it down, there's some type of emotional pain that people are going through that they just can't seem to work through. And so it's really important to address that, to be with a person side by side, to get through that.
But what's the difference between somebody, you know, kind of having a blue day, you know, or a couple blue days, and to the degree where they really need to seek professional help from, you know, a faith-based organization like a Renewed Mind? Where is that kind of that line? Is there like a line where someone's just having a blue day, but they don't need to necessarily run off, but you know, a point where they need some real professional help?
Yeah, you know, that's really tricky because you just never know. There are people who are reaching out for help who really don't want to kill themselves, but end up, you know, taking a bunch of pills or doing something that could cause death, and then it's kind of like they want to pull back, but it's too late. I would say if somebody is struggling or they've voiced, hey, I want to kill myself, that's gotten to a point where you really need to talk to somebody if they're saying, I want to kill myself. And you've seen some changes in behavior. You've seen, you know, Johnny's not as happy as he used to be. He's been tearful. He's isolating. But when you start to hear somebody say, look, you know, I don't want to be here anymore, there's never a wrong time.
You need to take it seriously.
Yeah, call 211. There's lots of resources that are out there that can help a person get connected.
Now, how often do like drugs and alcohol and you know and mental health issues play a role in somebody that's suicidal? So
if you start to see addiction, drugs like you mentioned, alcohol introduced into somebody who is struggling with depression already, then you start to see rates for suicide start to climb. So if you introduce that, then you'll see the chances of suicide begin to creep up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So fairly often.
You just kind of mentioned that Ohio in many ways is at the center of the opioid epidemic. Why do you think more people are using opioids and becoming addicted?
So there's lots of theories why Ohio is at the center of the opiate epidemic. But often people have had some type of experience with prescription medication, again, whether it was an injury or whether it was someone's medication they took from a medicine cabinet. That's usually the biggest predictor. Why? I'm not really sure. There's lots of theories on that. I could share a few if you'd like me to.
I would be interested. What would be your number one educated guess?
Why Ohio's the
Yep.
Well, I would say there's probably three things. Number one, Ohio is at the center of Route 80 and 90, the turnpike going east and west, and Route 75.
I wondered if you were going to say that.
Yeah, so
roads have a lot to play with that, doesn't it?
Roads do.
Yeah.
I would say number two, Ohio is writing a lot of prescription for pain medications. And then what we did was we shut down a lot of those pill mills. And so when people didn't have access to prescription medications, they turned to heroin. And when heroin was harder to find, they began to lace heroin with fentanyl. And fentanyl is a game changer because just a small dose, I'm talking the size of Abraham Lincoln's head on a penny, that size of fentanyl, that dosage size, will kill somebody. And so we're talking small doses of fentanyl are lethal. And so fentanyl got introduced into Ohio very quickly. And then, you read about how hospitals and doctors were judged according to how they treated pain. And so to lessen pain and to get better scores for healthcare, we just began to throw pain medications at folks. And somebody who has a cavity who walks away with a 30-day script for Oxycontin.
Yeah. Now, a couple of those answers didn't surprise me, but this third one, where you're really talking about hospitals being rewarded for reducing pain, are those laws unique to the state of Ohio? Could that be one of the reasons why we're having so many people diagnosed?
Yeah, and I guess reward's probably not the right word. I would say many hospitals, because they're Joint Commission accredited, many hospitals will look at what they call the fifth vital sign, which is pain. And so when hospitals score high, when people's pain hasn't subsided, then there's lots of questions to get asked and what could you have done better. And so I guess reward's probably not the right word, but I would say their outcomes, which is attached to reimbursement rates, that can have an impact if people's pain isn't lessened by their healthcare experience.
Well, this is some great information, and we are going to continue this conversation. But for a moment, we're going to take a quick break.
Do not be conformed to this world anymore. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so obviously, praying about your situation, reading God's word about your situation, talking with somebody who can pray for you and intercede for you is really important. It's really important that when somebody comes to you, not to judge them, but to just sit there and to listen and to understand and to learn about what they're going through and to be empathic. Those are all things that Christ showed us.
The mission of Dominion Broadcasting WLMB-TV 40 is to provide Christ-centered television of high technical quality and programming excellence to uplift, unite, educate, challenge, and encourage viewers in a manner consistent with the teachings of God's Word. Won't you join us? Please send your gift today and be a part of the ongoing mission of WLMB-TV 40. Thank you.
WLMB's free monthly program guide keeps you informed about your favorite Christ-centered and family-friendly programming found on WLMB. There's something for the whole family to enjoy, from great Bible teachers to classic family favorites. Plus, you'll find family movies, news from a Christian perspective, local shows Main Street and Pastor's Point, excellent don't-miss documentaries, and much more. Enjoy quality Christian television on WLMB-TV 40 and sign up for your free monthly program guide today.
Now, back to Main Street.
We are talking with Matthew Rizzo, President and CEO of A Renewed Mind, and we're going to continue our conversation. And, we've been talking a lot about suicide and drug use. And, what are some signs that someone is using opioids?
So what you'll usually see if a person is actually high on opiates, you will see somebody whose pupils are really tiny. Often they can be sweaty. At times they're just in this euphoric mood. Behavior-wise, though, maybe something that you would look for, people often report that money is missing, spoons are missing. Spoons, because you can cook down, heat up the heroin, and then it becomes more of a liquid form and then is injectable. So spoons often go missing. I mentioned money. Again, you'll just see the person's behavior change where they're just not their same personhood, if you will. And so those are just some things that you would look for. But again, I tell parents all the time, you know your kid better than anybody. So when you begin to see those changes with friends, eating, sleeping, different kind of mood, look for those things.
So because you said your kids is this something that's most common amongst like teens?
Well, you see, unfortunately, opiate use with our teens. You also see other substances, if you will. But maybe I should say, you know your spouse or your friends or, that kind of thing better than anybody. And so you just really start to see those changes in behavior.
At what point do most people seek help?
Unfortunately, it's often when the person is in the middle of a crisis. And so that seems to be the trigger for folks getting help. Sometimes that crisis can wear the clothes of the legal system. They've been arrested, a relationship deteriorates, they're terminated from their job, they have a broken relationship maybe with their kids, that kind of thing. So unfortunately, a lot of people seek help when they're in a crisis state.
So when should people seek help? At what point, is it like, okay?
Sure. I would say, are you talking about suicide or opiate use in particular?
Well, we've been talking about opiates, but, tell us both.
So suicide, I would say right away. If someone's struggling with depression and they just feel like they've done everything that they can do and they're still in that pit, I would get help right away. But I would, when it comes to opiate use, not wait. A lot of people who are in recovery, especially from alcohol dependency, they have lots of different relapses and over time they can get things straight. But with opiate use, people are overdosing and dying right away. And so if you feel like you're addicted to an opiate or you're addicted to a prescription medication, can't stop on your own, despite serious consequences, it's time to pick up the phone and get some help.
Yeah. And how can family or friends help?
Well, if you have a loved one who's struggling with that, obviously sit down and have the conversation with the person. If there's a person who they're comfortable with talking to, maybe sit down with 3 people and talk about it. But if you want to just pick up the phone and call 211 and look for some resources that are in the community, it's interesting, and I know we'll talk about this in a little bit, but clergy are often the front lines when it comes to getting help.
So what biblical advice do you have?
For someone who's struggling with addiction? Well, it's interesting, a renewed mind, we actually have our namesake, if you will, out of Romans 12:2, where it says, do not be conformed to this world anymore, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so obviously, praying about your situation, reading God's word about your situation, talking with somebody who can pray for you and intercede for you is really important. It's really important that when somebody comes to you, not to judge them, but to just sit there and to listen and to understand and to learn about what they're going through and to be empathic. Those are all things that Christ showed us. And so to be Christ-like is really important. And I think often, too many times we judge people, we attach a stigma to folks who are struggling with an addiction. We see them as weak people or it's a moral failure. And you know what? We all have our issues.
Yeah. So. How can the church help?
Well, in particular, again, when you look at the research, folks that are struggling with issues where they seek professional help, 40% of them seek clergy. The next group that's closest behind is their family doctor. So the church can help because they're able to, many pastors are trained in pastoral counseling, and they're able to provide some help. But when a pastor sees that over 4 to 8 sessions, people aren't getting better, that's probably the time that they should pick up the phone and call. Or if it's outside of their scope of practice or comfort, pick up the phone and call and get some help. But, again, praying for people, not judging people, trying to be there for folks. It's interesting. I've heard folks say that mental health is not a casserole illness. You break a hip or you hurt a knee, someone's laid up, you bring them over a casserole to help out. Often with mental health, you don't see people bringing over casseroles when folks are depressed or struggling. So,
well, you mentioned, pastors and then, getting help, but there comes a point where it's kind of beyond, the scope of what a pastor can do.
Mm-hmm.
How do pastors know, when it is time to pass on the mantle?
So again, I would say if within 4 to 8 sessions, a person's not getting better, or if a pastor can't commit the time, or if a pastor, it's outside of their comfort zone, that's probably the time when you should think about passing the baton. But there are some things that they can do. Getting educated on symptoms of mood disorders, having a person that they can triage with. If a person comes into their office and they're seeing certain things, being able to pick up the phone and call somebody who's a professional mental health counselor or addictionologist, really important they can do that. And having a referral base, knowing some counseling centers, very important that they can make referrals for.
Yeah. Give us a picture of what happens when you get a referral. I mean, what can a patient, a client expect from kind of the time they have made this point of demarcation where they need help, or their family has, family can say you need help, but ultimately the patient has to walk in the door. Mm-hmm. But what can they expect when they walk into a renewed mind? What process do you want to take them through from beginning to end?
So we'll gather some intake information. We will bring them in for an assessment. Part of that assessment, we really look at 5 domains, if you will. We look at the physical part, or the physiology part, the emotional part, the cognitive part, the social part, and the spiritual part. So we really look at those 5 dimensions of functioning, if you will. So we'll do an assessment, and then we'll put together a treatment plan. But you will see folks there, staff there, that are very engaging. They're there to listen. They're there to help with some practical solutions. We think it's really important that when a person picks up the phone, that within 24 to 48 hours, they get an assessment. Because that window of motivation sometimes is about that big.
Mm-hmm. And what would a treatment plan look like? I mean, I know that's like asking, a very broad question, but there has to be some common threads in a treatment plan.
So a couple common threads might be, we want to see the symptoms of whatever they're going through be reduced and the person's functioning improve. So our goals are really centered around those types of things. So if a person's depressed, we don't want to see a person as isolated. We want to see them more engaged. We don't want to have them having thoughts about hopelessness or helplessness. And then we want to see on the other side their functioning improve. So work's better, relationships are better, they feel better physically, they're sleeping through the night, they're able to focus better. So we want to see that functioning improve as their symptoms come down.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question that's probably not asked to you very often, but I'm sure it has to be part of your life. Mm-hmm. When someone comes in, they're in this crisis mode, you put together this plan, but eventually they're walking out the door. You're probably making tons of phone calls trying to get their social network to give them a pat on the back and encourage them along. But I'm sure there's lots of times where you find that people don't even have that type of social network. Right. That probably brings a lot of strain and stress on you as the counselors. Tell us a little bit about that side of the world.
Well, so that's why it's so important to have a church, to have a body that can help people. And so you're right. I would say statistically it bears out that when people are isolated and they don't have that sober support network, or they just don't have that support network for mental health issues, people's path to recovery is definitely harder. So that can be very frustrating, but it's important for the church to step in and help out.
Well, when it is time to step in and help out, your friend is struggling, what does that moment of confrontation look like?
So, it doesn't have to be a confrontation, I think. I think it's just an open, caring, genuine conversation. And it's just really, to me, it's staying away from opinions and really looking at the facts. It's really looking at someone's behavior. And so, it's not trying to judge a person, but it's like, here's what I see you doing. Here's what I see you saying. here's who I see you hanging out with, you know, so.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Can you tell us a story, not, of course, saying anybody's real name, but can you tell us a story of someone that, you know, came to a renewed mind and today is in their sound mind, they're in their right mind, they're in a right relationship with the Lord? And I'm not talking something that happened overnight, but maybe a story that you have to say, you know, if we had a poster child of a story that has happened in a renewed mind, would you share that with us?
So I actually have a number of stories, but probably the one that's freshest to my mind, I was at a local restaurant and I was with another organization. We were having a luncheon, a business luncheon, and a waitress came up to me and said, hey, she saw my sweatshirt that I had on, which had our logo on it, and she said, do you work at a renewed mind? I said, yes, I do. And she says, I want you to know I've been clean for, you know, almost a year now, working, going back to school to get my counseling degree.
Awesome.
And, you know, just want to thank you for being with me during that season of my journey. And, you know, it took a couple of times to get on track, but this person was doing very well and was, again, going back to school. Actually, I think she was getting her social work degree and wanted to give back and wanted to be able to help folks and share her recovery process because it was successful for her.
That's a great story.
That is.
So,
well, what resources would you recommend for someone who is not ready or is unable to visit a renewed mind?
So there's lots of stuff obviously on the internet. SAMHSA has a lot of interesting pieces of knowledge that you can read. 211, again, is a resource that can talk about organizations in the community. I, of course, am partial to Scripture. That's, you know, my favorite resource, if you will. But when a person's not ready, a person's not ready. Now, you can influence, but they have to be willing to change.
Yeah.
So,
kind of that old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
right, and we try to make the water a little more appealing.
Well, what would you say to someone who is in the midst of addiction or, you know, feeling hopeless right now?
That there is hope, that people do get better, that recovery does work. I don't understand it, you know, in the over 25 years of being in this helping field. You know, I have seen folks where instantly, for whatever reason, you know, they're like in this basement and the Lord kind of gets on this elevator and takes it down to the basement, gets a hold of the person, puts them back on the elevator, and back up to the floor where they belong they go. But then there are times when he gets on that elevator, he meets you in the basement, but for whatever reason, he decides to take the stairs back. And I don't know why one process is longer than the other, but I do know this, that you're never alone. He's always with you, and he has a destination for you. And sometimes, even though it's a longer process, it's during that stairwell experience that God really changes your life and gets a hold of you. Yeah. And so it's interesting to me, but I know that you're never alone. So don't forget that is what I would say.
Well, that is a great analogy and a good word. What's your website?
renewedmindservices.org.
So that people can find you right there, right?
Correct. We have a phone number, too, I can share.
Yep.
419-720-9247.
Very good. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And I hope that, you know, if somebody's watching, listening, you know, right now, that if they need help or they know somebody that needs help, that they will check out A Renewed Mind.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this week on Main Street. Be sure to join us next week for another great episode.
We hope that Main Street has been a blessing to you today. Please feel free to contact the following to learn more about the topics discussed on today's show. WLMB would like to thank all the faithful supporters of WLMB that make this program possible. Main Street is a production of WLMB-TV 40 in Toledo. All rights reserved.